Again, thanks for being here with me, y'all. It's your boy Tony V. We going through this Anacalypsis by Godfrey Higgins again. This time we're going to be in chapter 4, and this is going to be in relation to the two ancient Ethiopias. Did you know there was two ancient Ethiopias? Yeah, you've known. If you've been with me this long, you know. One great black nation in Asia. Uh-oh. The Buddha of India, a Negro. Uh-oh. The Arabians were Cushites. Memnon, shepherd kings. Hindus and Egyptians similar. Syria, peopled from India. So we're going to dive through this. We're going to read through this. Y'all know I love Godfrey Higgins. I feel like he drops really pertinent information that is important to all of us. But y'all got to remember, too, that this body of work was not released while he was alive. He kept this under wraps, and a lot of this information was utilized and carried with the Theosophical movement, the Theosophical Society, H.P. Blavatsky. So, we just, hey, man, we diving in, you dig? So it says, in taking a survey of the human inhabitants of the world, we find two classes distinguished from each other by a clear and definite line of demarcation, the black and the white colors of their skins. This distinguishing mark we discover to have existed in ages the most remote. If we suppose them all to have descended from one pair, the question arises, was that pair black or white? If I were at present to say that I thought them black, I should be accused of a fondness for paradox, and I should find a few persons to agree with me, as the African Negroes do when they tell Europeans that the devil is white. And yet, no one, except a West Indian planter, will deny that the poor Africans have reason on their side. Uh-oh. All reason is on the side of those who are swarthy. And however, I say not that they were black, but I shall, in the course of this work, produce a number of extraordinary facts, which will be quite sufficient to prove that a black race, in very early times, had more influence over the affairs of the world than has been lately suspected. Let's repeat that. However, I say not that they were black, but I shall, in the course of this work, produce a number of extraordinary facts, which will be quite sufficient to prove that a black race, in very early times, had more influence over the affairs of the world than has been lately suspected. Why is that? Because they whitewashed everything. They whitewashed, when I say everything, you know what I'm talking about. A good amount of information. Paintings have been repainted. Codexes have been burned. Temples destroyed. Army Corps of Engineers. We already went over that on episode 5 of America's The True Old World. How they just out here destroying Hebrew mounds and structures. And I think I shall show, by some very striking circumstances yet existing, that the effects of this influence have not entirely passed away. And this was at his time. Number 2. It was the opinion of Sir William Jones that a great nation of blacks formerly possessed the dominion of Asia and held the east of empire at Sidon. Who we talking about? We talking about the Tartarians. And that's what's so big of a deal. Everybody want to talk about the Tartarians, but they don't want to talk, they want to talk about it in a fantasy way, imagining it in their own way. But they don't want to talk about the aspect that the proverbial phrases back then was, as black as Tartars. They don't want to talk about the aspect that within historical master textbooks, architecture textbooks, John Britton, that Tartarian is a mode of Moorish workmanship as far as architecture is concerned. We have all these things, but nobody wants to straight admit to that. They want to just beat around the bush. Now, down here we have some footnotes. We have 1 and 2. It says, 1 is, I do not use the word Negro because they may not have been Negroes, though blacks. though it is probable that they were so, and I wish the distinction to be remembered. So right off the bat, he letting you know, he being clear with it. Hey man, they may have not been Negroes, because Negroes is a certain class of dark-skinned people, though they are, you see what I'm saying? So, and you can look at it right here. I mean, look at this, right? Look at all the classes of people, okay? Yet, I mean, come on, y'all. It's quite clear, okay? Don't let yourself get fooled, man. So he says, these must have been the people called by Mr. Maurice Cushites, or Cuthites, described in Genesis, and the opinion that they were blacks is corroborated by the translators of the Pentateuch, called the 70, constantly rendering the word Cush by Ethiopia. It is very certain that if this opinion be well founded, we must go for the time when the empire flourished to a period anterior to all regular histories. It can only be known to have existed from accidental circumstances which have escaped amidst the ruins of empires and the wrecks of time. So we talking about so far back that these ruins have been destroyed, like we talking about in the Grand Canyon, the Isis Temple, right? We see these things and we know them to be true, but all of it has been suffrage to the passing of the changing of the ever moment of now, which we have related to time. So, you know, like our last video where we're talking about how deep the forests were in New Orleans, and that there were 4 layers of ancient forests until you actually reach the 50,000-year-old skeleton. Okay? So of this nation we have no account, but it must have flourished after the deluge. And as our regular chronological systems fill up the time between the flood and what is called known undoubted history. If it be allowed to have existed, its existence will of course prove that no dependence can be placed upon the early parts of that history. It will show that all the early chronology is false, for the story of this empire is not told. Oh man. So see, me here in this moment now of the day or the year in which we call 2023, which is not really the correct even numerical sequence, I still find myself understanding, having this intuitional knowing of what he was writing about all back then. It will show that all the early chronology is false. What are we talking about here? Is nobody else besides me studied Anatoly Fomenko? If you've been with me for a while, you know that Anatoly Fomenko has a huge body of work in relation to how messed up the chronology really is. Moving on, he says, for the story of this empire is not told. And this is what we talking about, because it seems as though we are bringing out the aspect as far as the community, Tartarians, because no one really mentioned it before. This was never taught in school. We heard about the Mongols, you know what I'm saying? We heard about anything and everything else that's out there in the mainstream, but where did the Tartarian aspect go, and why did that not get taught as huge as it was within our history? It is certain that its existence can only be found from insulated circumstances collected from various quarters and combining to establish the fact. And that's what we got to do. Like, that's what we all out here do. We combining portions from all over, because no one ever had it clear at this point. Until this point, nobody understood, because the pieces were all over. We had to combine and put it all together to bring about the actual vision of what is real. But if I succeed in collecting a sufficient number to carry conviction to an impartial mind, such as yourself, y'all, the empire must be allowed to have existed. So 3, the religion of Buddha of India is well known to have been very ancient. In the most ancient temples scattered throughout Asia, where his worship is yet continued, he is found black as jet, with the flat face, thick lips, and curly hair of a Negro. Several statues of him may be met within the Museum of the East India Company. There are 2 exemplars of him brooding on the face of the deep upon a coiled serpent. To what time we to allot this Negro? He will be proved to have been prior to the god called Krishna. He will be prior to the god called Krishna. And the fact is that he's a Negro. He must have been prior to the contemporaneous with the black empire, supposed by Sir William Jones to have flourished at Ceylon. The religion of this Negro god is found by the ruins of his temples and other circumstances to have been spread over an immense extent of country, even to the remote parts of Britain, and to have been professed by devotees, inconceivably numerous. I very much doubt whether Christianity at this day is professed by more persons than yet profess the religion of Buddha. Of this I shall say more hereafter. When several cities, countries, or rivers at great distances from each other are found to be called by the same name, the coincidence cannot be attributed to accident, but some specific cause for such an effect must be looked for. You hear that now? You hear that now? So when we be talking about all these cities over here in America having names like countries or cities over on the other side of the world, what's that about? If he's saying the same thing, we should start to understand that, right? I mean, if we talking that scholarly talk, come on now. It's not just a coincidence. Can't be just attributed to accident. There is a specific cause and a certain effect. Thus, we have several cities called Heliopolis, or the city of the sun, the reason for which is sufficiently obvious. Thus, again, there were several Alexandrias, and on close examination we find 2 Ethiopias alluded to in ancient history, one above the higher, or southern part of Egypt, and the other somewhere to the east of it, and, as it has been thought, in Arabia. So what they doing is they trying to place, or at least right now he's saying that we have a Ethiopia in Egypt and one in Arabia. So they not trying to compare it right now to America. Okay? Or is he, by talking about the Egypt being truly America and the Arabia being Africa? Ooh, watch out. The people of this latter are called Cushim in the Hebrew text of the Old Testament, and Ethiopians by the text of the Septuagint, or the 70. That they cannot have been the Ethiopians of Africa is evident from a single passage, where they are said to have invaded Judah in the days of Asa, under Zerah, their king or leader. Then we have that footnote number 3. I think number 3 is 2 Chronicles there. So then he says, but the Lord smote the Cushim, and Asa, and the people that were with him pursued them unto Gerar. And the Ethiopians were overthrown, and they, i.e. Asa, and his people, smote all the cities round about Gerar, etc. Whence it plainly follows that the Cushim here mentioned were such as inhabited the parts adjoining to Gerar, and consequently not any part of the African Ethiopia, but Arabia. When it is said that Asa smote the Cushites or Ethiopians in number 1,000,000 of soldiers as far as Gerar, and despoiled all the cities round about, it is absurd to suppose that the Gerar and the lot of the tribe of Simon is meant. The expression, all the cities and the 1,000,000 of men, cannot apply to that little town of that tribe. probably the city in Wilkinson's atlas in the Tabula Orientalis at the side of the Persian Gulf, which is called Gurara. Gura is the city meant by the word Gurar, and that Sabah was near where it was placed by Dr. Stuckley, or somewhere in the peninsula, now called Arabia. Could be not. Now, what we know now about America, hey man, maybe he didn't notice at that time. But just the aspect that things are completely changed to what they are now is what we got to look at. We just got to understand where they was at then and what they knew now, or what they knew then. Because what they knew then is so much different than what we know now. And what was known then isn't even known now in some instances. In 2 Chronicles, it is said, and the Arabians that were near the Ethiopians. This again shows that the Ethiopians were in the peninsula, or bordered on it to the eastwards. And that's not necessarily true. They could have just meant overall, over the whole landmass, knowing that they knew the landmass and how it went through cycles at that time. The Arabians were still near the Ethiopians. You could get to it by ship very easily. But he goes on to say, they could not have lived to the west because the whole land of Egypt lay between them, if they went by land, and the Red Sea lay between the two nations westwards. In Habakkuk, the words Midian, and Cushan are used as synonyms. I saw the tents of Cushan in affliction. The curtains of the land of Midian did tremble. It is said in Numbers, quote, and Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman, unquote. Cushite. It appears that this Ethiopian woman was the daughter of Jethro, priest of Midian, near Horeb in Arabia. Again, he says, it appears. Number 5. Dr. Wells has justly observed that the Cush spoken of in Scripture is evidently Arabia, from Numbers, just cited, and that it is also certain from Exodus that the wife of Moses was a Midianitish woman. And it is proved that Midian, or Madian, was in Arabia, from Exodus. Consequently, the Cush here spoken of and called Ethiopia must necessarily mean Arabia. He also proves from Ezekiel that when God says he will make the land desolate from the tower of Syene to the borders of Ethiopia. Cush, he cannot mean an African Cush because he evidently means from one boundary of Egypt to the other. And as Syene is the southern boundary between the African Ethiopia and Egypt, it cannot possibly be that he speaks of the former, but of the other end of Egypt, which is Arabia. So you see, they got it placed over there like they always have been, lost, still trying to figure out the sauce, not knowing clearly that it's all America. The circumstances of the translators of the Septuagint version of the Pentateuch having rendered the word Cush by the word Ethiopia is a very decisive proof that the theory of the two Ethiopians is well founded. Let the translators have been who they may, it is totally impossible to believe that they could be so ignorant as to suppose that the African Ethiopia could border on the Euphrates, or that the Cushites could be African Ethiopians. You see what I'm saying? It's going in. So down here, I want to see what this footnote's talking about. So it says, it is not to be supposed that this great tribe of Israelites had not laws before those given in Sinai, It is perfectly clear that the numbers of those in Leviticus were only reenactments of old laws or customs. The marriage of Moses with an Ethiopian woman against which Miriam and Aaron spoke was a breach of the law, and the children were illegitimate. This was the reason why Aaron succeeded to the priestly office instead of the son of Moses. This also furnishes an answer to what a learned author has written about the disinterested conduct of Moses proving his divine mission. The conduct of Moses in this instance proves nothing, and all the labor of the learned gentleman has been thrown away. But Moses had 2 wives, both Ethiopians, one of Meroe, called Tharpis, and the other of Midian in Arabia, Josephus. Now, it says right here, Dr. Wells states that the Ethiopians of Africa alone are commonly called Ludim, both by ancient and modern writers. And we got one footnote here. Always just got the source for that. Cool, no problem. So then he says, Mr. Frey, in his vocabulary, gives the word kus, as a word whose meaning is unknown, but the Septuagint tells us it meant black. Now it says, if my reader will examine all the remaining passages of the Old Testament, not cited by me, where the words Ethiopia and Ethiopians are used, he will see that many of them can go by no possibility relate to the African Ethiopia. That's awesome. That's amazing. Because if we're looking at everything that we're looking at, when we're looking at how you got the Mormons speaking about how America is Egypt, or America is the true world. How we've been speaking about how America is the true world, and how everything just got switched up so crazy. How all the artifacts are coming from here in America. I mean, like, it's getting deep, y'all. We're gonna keep going though. So it says here in number 6, the Ethiopians to have come and settled in Egypt in the time of Amenophis. So number 6, it says, Eusebius states that the Ethiopians to have come and settled in Egypt in the time of Amenophis. So this is amazing. Eusebius states that the Ethiopians to have come and settled in Egypt in the time of Amenophis. So what did we just learn from, though? From Dr. R.S. Clymer. Who settled Egypt, y'all? The Toltecs settled Egypt. So if we know that the Toltecs settled Egypt, the other name that they go by, which Eusebius called, who? The Ethiopians. So that's how we have this connection. You see how we have to, again, like he was saying earlier, we have to combine everything and look at the overall picture. You know, I got a certain name, but I go by Tona V. You dig? According to this account, as well as to the account given by Philostratus, there was no such country as Ethiopia beyond Egypt until this invasion. According to Eusebius, these people came from the river Indus and planted themselves in the south of Egypt, in the country called from them Ethiopia, Indus, India Superior, the West Indies, West India. Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. The circumstance named by Eusebius that they came from the Indus at all events implies that they came from the east and not from the south, and would induce a person to suspect them from having crossed the Red Sea from Arabia. They must either have done this or have come round the northern end of the Red Sea by the Isthmus of Suez, but they certainly could not have come from the present Ethiopia. It's down here, I got some stuff highlighted, let's run through it. But there are several passages in ancient writers which prove that Eusebius is right in saying not only that they come from the east, but from a very distant or very eastern part. Not just the remote east, y'all. What you talking about? A very distant, very eastern part. Excuse me, y'all know I'm drinking on this coffee this morning. 7:32 right now for me. Herodotus says that there were two Ethiopian nations, one in India and the other in Egypt. Which India are we talking about? Because it wasn't India back then. Hindustan, Bharat. It wasn't India back then. He derived his information from the Egyptian priests, a race of people who must have known the truth, and there seems no reason either for them or Herodotus to have misstated the fact. Philostratus says that the I might murder this one. Gymnosophists of Ethiopia, who settled near the sources of the Nile, descended from the Brahmins of India, having been driven thence for the murder of their king. This Philostratus says he learned from an ancient Brahmin called Jarchas. Another ancient writer, Eustathius, also states that the Ethiopians came from India. These concurring accounts can scarcely be doubted, and here may be discovered the mode and time also when great numbers of ancient rites and ceremonies might be imparted from India into Egypt, for that there was a most intimate relation between them in very ancient times cannot be doubted. Indeed, it is not doubted. The only question has been whether Egypt borrowed from India or India from Egypt. All probability is clearly for 1,000 reasons in favor of the superior antiquity of India, also known as America. So what you have to understand, okay, we'll keep going. As Bailey and many other learned men have shown, a probability which seems to be reduced to a certainty by Herodotus, the Egyptians themselves, and the other authors just now quoted. There is not a particular of proof from any historical records known to the author that any colony ever passed from Egypt to India, but there is, we see, direct positive historical evidence of the Indians having come to Africa. No attention can be paid to the ideal or idle stories of the conquest of India by Bacchus, who was merely an imaginary personage. In short, the god Sol. No attention can be paid to the idle stories of the conquest of India by Bacchus, who was merely an imaginary personage. In short, the god Sol. Oh my God. So what we got going on here is we're seeing now the correlations of the aspect of Atlantis. We understand that antiquity of time shows that the oldest of men to be of a very dark colored skin. We know that, and even though we haven't dived into it, let's say we don't know yet because we haven't completely gone through other sources, but we have inclination that the Toltecs settled Egypt. We're not talking about conquered, we're talking about settled Egypt. And we know that Ethiopians' definition is one of dark skin. Didn't mean a country. It meant a skin. The characteristics, swarthy. Dr. Shuckford gives an opinion that Homer and Herodotus are both right, and that there were two Ethiopias, and that the Africans came from India. America. India superior. What you talking about? Let's go. America is the true world. Number 7. The bishop of Ranches thinks he has found 3 provinces of the name of Chus: Ethiopia, Arabia, and Siciliana. We got a footnote. What's he say? Okay, giving his sources. There were 3 Ethiopias, that is, countries of blacks, not 3 churches or chusis. And this is perfectly consistent with what M. Bachart has maintained, that Ethiopia of Africa is not named Chus in any place of Scripture, and this is also consistent with what is said by both Homer and Herodotus. The bishop shows clearly that the ancient Siciliana is the modern Chusatan. Or Elam, of which Susa was the capital. Now you see how we're getting into wordplay here. What can you turn this Chusatan into? Chusatan. Etymology-wise, what all fits there? You see what I'm saying? What can that be a play on words? Or Elam, okay? Of which Susa was the capital. The famous Memnon, probably the son, was said to be the son of Aurora. But Aeschylus informs us that Cicene was the mother of Memnon, and to him the foundation of Susa is attributed. And its citadel was called Memnonium, in itself the city of Memnon. This is the Memnon who is said to have been sent to the siege of Troy and to have been slain by Achilles, and who is also said by the ancient authors to be an Ethiopian or a black. So how does that even play out right there? We got the siege of Troy being slain by Achilles, and by the ancient writers, he was an Ethiopian or black, but yet we don't have that being played out in our day today. Like, dude, white everywhere. I mean, you got Hercules out here white, but you got all the black choir singers. You see what I'm saying? Yes, and I'm talking about the cartoon. Y'all chill. I got children. It seems the Egyptians supposed that this Memnon was their king, Amenophis. Okay? Here we go. The Ethiopians are stated by Herodotus to have come from the Indus. America. India superior. Is nobody thinking about all the poses, all the dreads, all the black people, and everything that is on the South American, Yucatan, Aztec, Toltec, Mayan temples? Is nobody paying attention? I mean, it's very easy to put together. Once you have that overall view, once you've studied enough, you can see where the mistakes are made. It's like intuition. It's almost like the great ether of all spirit speaks to you, works through. You're able to tap in. Call me crazy. I don't know. Say what you want. According to what modern chronologers deduce from his words about the year 1615 BC, about 400 years after the birth of Abraham, in 1996, and about 100 years before Moses rebelled against the Egyptians and brought the Israelites out of Egypt, palaces were shown which belonged to this Memnon at Thebes and other places in Egypt, as well as at Susa, which from him were called in both places Memnoniums. Now, right here, I want to pause because I want you to think on a larger scale. Like, if people was talking about we need to leave up out of Egypt, why you got to think it got to be so localized? If they had such amazing ships, canals, like the world was really traveling at a big rate. Like, y'all got to forget it. Y'all got to remember that. We're forgetting that just how easy it was for them to travel. how much more water was present among the land masses, how many land masses were still present and above the waters. So you got to really understand that things change over time. Don't try to just relate yourself and put yourself in this period as how would they have done it. You got to remember that the land masses have changed, okay? Big time. And to him was erected the famous statue at Thebes, which is alleged to have given out a sound when first struck by the rays of the morning sun. Pretty amazing. Did you hear that? Which is alleged to have given out a sound when first struck by the rays of the morning sun. So they created something possibly that automatically made noise when the sun hit it in the morning. Bishop Hewitt thinks probably very correctly that this statue was made in imitation of similar things which the Jewish traveler Rabbi Benjamin found in the country where the descendants of Chus adore the sun. In this he shows to be the country of which we speak. Where do they adore the sun, y'all? Where do they adore the sun? We know that everything along the Mississippi was aligned to the sun and the moon. We know that everything was aligned down in South America to the sun. We understood that the life giver was the symbol of the great creator of all. Was just a symbol. But that was the powerful force, the sun. Like, why do you think so many people like trip out on secret societies talking about, oh, they worship the sun? No, that's a recognition of the great creator, y'all. That's like what y'all not getting about that. It lies about Basora, where the Sabians are found in the greatest numbers, and who are the people of whom he speaks. The bishop thinks this Memnon cannot have been Amemnophis, because he lived very many years before the siege of Troy, in which he is said to have been an actor. It seems to me to be as absurd to look to Homer or Virgil for the chronology of historical facts as to Shakespeare, Milton, and any other epic poet. These poems may state facts, but nothing of a historical or chronological kind can be received without some collateral evidence and confirmation. Take it back. It's a big statement. Here we go again. It seems to me, and when we say me, we're talking about Godfrey Higgins, to be as absurd to look to Homer or Virgil for the chronology of historical facts, you see it's italicized there, as to Shakespeare, Milton, or any other epic poet. Even though these poems may state facts, nothing of a historical or chronological kind can be received without some collateral evidence and confirmation. It never was supposed to be incumbent on any epic poet to tie himself down to mere historical matters of fact. And wherever it is evident, either from the admission of a later historical author or from any other circumstance, that he is relating facts from the works of the poets without any other authority, he can be as little dependent upon as they can be. That's a big one, y'all. But a lot of these people are. They taking what these poets write and putting them in as historical facts, y'all. And that's been what's happening. The hijack of our history has been so crazy that people like me have to go through and dive through. People like Curameo have to go through and dive through. People like 4-3 True the Drop have to go through and comb it all out. People like Straight Up. People like Thrawn Skywalker. People like Uriah Brandon over there at UB News. I mean, we got people all over, y'all, that's really out here diving and doing what we can to find and present the truth. Not just for ourselves, not just because we want to satisfy ourselves in relation to not being fooled out. Like, we can't be fooled. You can't be fooled. That's why you're here. But it's not just for us, it's for our children and the future generations, y'all. We do it for the people. We do it for the Most High. The bishop has shown that the accounts of modern authors, George Syncellus, Suidas, Pausanias, Dionysus, etc., are full of contradictions. Look at there. Look at there. Are full of contradictions that they are obliged to suppose to Memnons. All this arises from these persons treating the poem of Homer as a history instead of a poem. Look at there. That's what I'm talking about. They is laying themselves down to a certain belief based off of a poem. And they always will say that, Homer said this. Homer said this. Well, Homer says, well, they're saying that Atlantis is over here. Yo, bro, chill. Get it right. Quit trying to always hijack and place what you want to be when everything else contradicts it. You just don't want to look for it. Y'all have used some figures, whether they're real or imaginary, within the historical record to back up your claim and base all of the mainstream evidence based on that. When everybody that goes and does the research beyond it, throughout all of this ever moment point of time, has wrote down and researched, and where's the light of day? Where does that information come up? It don't, because it takes away from what you've built as a history. Again, his story. We shall never have an ancient history worthy of the perusal of men of common sense till we cease treating poems as history and send back such personages as Hercules, Theseus, Bacchus, etc. to the heavens, whence their history is taken, and whence they never descended to the earth. Oh, man. It's good stuff, y'all. It's good stuff. It is not meant to be asserted that these epic poems may not be of great use to a historian. It is only meant to protect it, and it has been. Has it not? Over all this time, has it not been? These epic poems have been of great use to the historians. The people out here with the huge big channels that are 100,000, 200,000 views based on a false history from a poet. Get out of here, y'all. It is only meant to protest against their being held as authority by themselves, when opposed either to other histories or to known chronology. This case of Memnon is in point. Homer wanted a hero to fill up his poem, and without any regard to date or anything wrong in so doing, he accommodated the history to his poem, making use of a Memnophis or Memnon, or the religious tradition, whichever it was, as he thought proper. These poems may also be of great use as evidence of the customs and manners of the times, both of when they were written and previously, and very often of dry, unconnected facts, which may turn out to be of consequence. Thus Virgil makes Memnon black, as does Pindar. 1 and 2 on the footnotes. We got sources here. Any words? Nope, we just got some sources. So the sources of when it was stated that Virgil makes Memnon black, as does also Pindar. Okay, so we have our sources down here for both of them making this statement. That Pindar and Virgil were right. The features of the bust of Memnon in the British Museum prove, for they are evidently those of the Negro. And this is why previously, just a couple weeks ago, I put out some empowering quotes about Negroes, okay? Because this isn't what's taught. It's known for those who deeply study. But then again, you go to your common person these days, especially in America, you're not going to get responses that are on an intellectual type basis. You're going to get, it's bad. It's very bad. Number 8. It is probable that the Memnon here spoken of, if there ever were such a man, was the leader of the shepherds, who are stated by Manetho and other historians to have come from the east and to have conquered Egypt. Now, when we think about this as well, the shepherds, right? We already know that the sheep, the horse, everything is originating in America, and it did not come from that localized area whatsoever. So when we're talking about true shepherds, what shepherds are we talking about? What Far East are we talking about? The learned Dr. Shuckford thinks that the troubles caused in Egypt by the shepherd kings appear to have happened about the time the Jews left it under Moses. He places these events between the death of Joseph and the birth of Moses, and he supposes that the Jews left the country in consequence of the oppressions of these shepherd kings. It is very clear that much confusion. And when we're talking about shepherd kings, what are they shepherding? Are they shepherding llamas? Okay, were they utilizing the llamas at that time before much of the sheep? Okay, let's get it right. It is very clear that much confusion has arisen in this part of ancient history from these eastern shepherds having been confounded with the Israelites, and also from the facts relating to one having been attributed to the other. Josephus takes the different accounts to relate to the same people. This is attended with great difficulty. The shepherds are said by Manetho, after a severe struggle with the old inhabitants, to have taken refuge in a city called Avaris, or Abaris, where they were a long time besieged, and whence at last they departed, 240,000 in number, together with their wives and children, in consequence of a capitulation, into the deserts of Syria. So we also have 240,000, which numerology comes out to 6. I always look out for the numbers just to see what's going on. 24, 6. Then we have the footnote 4. So it says footnote 4 here. We read of a person coming from the Hyperboreans to Greece in the time of Pythagoras, called Abadis or Avaris. Josephus also tells us that the city in the Sait Nomas, Set Orit, i.e. Goshen, where the Oriental shepherds resided, was called Avaris. Wow, pretty interesting, right? Where the Oriental shepherds resided was called Avaris. Also, we have him saying from the Hyperboreans to Greece. Okay. It says, now I suspect that this man was called from the Hebrew word Ober, Iberians. Maybe not. We can keep going. As was also the name of the city, and that they both meant stranger or foreigner, the same as the tribe of Abraham in Syria. Okay, so we're going to go back up. If there were two races of people who have been confounded together, one of which came from India and overran Arabia, Palestine, and Egypt, and brought thence its religion to the Egyptians, and was in color black, it must have come in a very remote period. This may have been the race of shepherd kings of whom Josephus speaks when he says they oppressed the Israelites. But the assertion of Josephus can hardly have been true, for they must have been expelled long before the Israelites came. If y'all not seeing how big of a deal this is coming through, so I'm going to go back and then we're going to go all the way through this again. These are big drops. If there were two races of people who have been confounded together, one of which came from India and overran Arabia, Palestine, and Egypt, and brought thence its religion to the Egyptians, and was in color black, it must have come in a very remote period. This may have been the race of shepherd kings of whom Josephus speaks when he says they oppressed the Israelites. But the assertion of Josephus can hardly have been true, for they must have been expelled long before the Israelites came. The second race were the Arabian shepherd tribe called captives, who, after being settled some time in the land of Goshen, were driven or went out into the open country of Arabia. They at last, under the command of Joshua, conquered Palestine and finally settled there. Bishop Cumberland has proved that there was a dynasty of Phoenician shepherd kings who were driven out 300 years before Moses. These seem to have been the Black or Ethiopian Phoenician Memnonites. Okay, so let's finish this paragraph. They may have exactly answered to this description, but to his date of 300 years I paid no attention. Further than that, it was of great length of time. So you see, what's ended up happening, we're going to start there on the length of time. In relation to what they say is 300 years, could be 300,000. You see what I'm saying? Like, these people, or 3,000 in itself, like, these people place all of this history in such a short time when it has come over ages and ages and ages, cycles of the sun around the larger landmass, okay? Like, we have to start understanding that a lot of these structures, a lot of these artifacts, these come from previous cycles, y'all. It's not no 5,000 years ago. We're talking about a whole nother 26,000 years ago, 17,000 years ago, 52,000 years ago. You see what I'm saying? But another aspect here is the fact that when we're talking about all of this, or at least Godfrey Higgins is, everything here, what he's speaking of, everybody was black, bro. Okay, he's talking about, and those who came from India. Are we talking about India superior, or are we actually talking about Hindustan Bharat? Because we know that the Mayans, the Nagas, the Mayans took over their information with their knowledge over to what is now known as India, or Hindustan Bharat. Okay? So, what else we got here? He goes in to say that, yeah, Bishop Cumberland has proved that there was a dynasty of Phoenician shepherd kings who were driven out 300 years before Moses. These seem to have been the Black or Ethiopian Phoenician Memnonites. So there you go with the Phoenician. So if we're talking about Phoenician, then we're talking about Finnish. And if we're talking about Finnish, we're talking about Phoenician. So these two are one and the same. And what is Godfrey Higgins sitting here saying? They black. So all this, like, you know, I be trying to just keep it straight up, you know, because that's what the people I study do. They keep it straight up. They're not here to, like, fit an agenda. They just here to state the facts and let the facts be known. Josephus says that the copies of Manetho differed, that in one the shepherds were called captives, not kings, and that he thinks this is more agreeable to ancient history. That Manetho also says the nation called shepherds were likewise called captives in their sacred books, and that after they were driven out of Egypt, they journeyed through the wilderness of Syria and built a city in Judea, which they called Jerusalem. Judea, huh? Paru, Jerusalem, Paru, Salem. My boy Tlan Skywalker got a lot of good work we're going to have to dive into in relation to Jeru and Paru. Josephus says that Manetho was an Egyptian by birth, but that he understood Greek, in which he wrote his history, translating it from the old Egyptian records. If the author understands Mr. Faber rightly in his Hore, I can't even say that. Don't even let me try. But y'all can see it right here. This is the book. If you want to look it up, or the writing, manuscript. He is of opinion that these shepherd captives were the Israelites. The accounts of these two tribes of people are confused, as many as may naturally be expected, but there are certainly many striking traits of resemblance between them. Mr. Shuckford, with whom in his Mr. Volney agrees, thinks they were two races of shepherd kings. In this opinion, he coincides with most of the ancients, but most certainly in his treatise against Apion, Josephus only names one. Let's see what this, okay, so he gives the source. We shall have much to say hereafter respecting these shepherds under the name of Bali, Palai. Palestine, Palai. Pali, we'll see. The only objection which occurs against Amemnophis, or Memnon, being the leader of the Hindu race. So now we have a Hindu instead of India race, who first came from the Indus to Egypt, is that according to our ideas of his chronology, he could scarcely be sufficiently early to agree with the known historical records of India. But our chronology is in so very vague and uncertain a state that very little dependence can be placed upon it. Oh man, so he's not really validating it. And it will never be any better till learned men search for the truth and fairly state it, instead of sacrificing to the idle legends or allegories of the priest, which cannot be any possible ingenuity be made consistent even with themselves. Man, he's saying you got to watch out for the hijack. You got to watch out. Mr. Wilsford, in his treatise on Egypt and the Nile, in the Asiatic Researches, informs us that many very ancient statues of the god Buddha in India have crisp, curly hair, with flat noses and thick lips, and adds, nor can it be reasonably doubted that a race of Negroes formerly had power and preeminence in India. It's a big statement, y'all. And where they come from? Where they come from? They was always here. When you see that hashtag, we were already here, that's for real, y'all. This is confirmed by Mr. Maurice, who says, quote, the figures in the Hindu caverns are of a very different character from the present race of Hindus. Their countenances are broad and full, the nose flat, and the lips, particularly the upper lip, remarkably thick, unquote. Okay? And you can see, that's again got number 2. He's got the source down here, number 2. All right? So we're keeping it sourced up, you dig? This again confirmed by Colonel Fitzclarence in the journal of his journey from India, and Mr. Maurice, in the first volume of his Indian Antiquities, states that the figures in the caves in India and in the temples in Egypt are absolutely the same as given by Bruce and Niebuhr, etc. Justin states that the Phoenicians, being obliged to leave their native country in the east, they settled first near the Assyrian lake, which is the Persian Gulf, and Maurice says, quote, we find an extensive district named Palestine to the east of the Euphrates and Tigris. The word Palestine seems derived from Palistan, the seat of Palis, or shepherds. Pali in India means shepherd. Yo, what's going on? Getting some correlations? Yeah. This confirms Sir William Jones's opinion in a striking manner respecting a black race having reigned at Sidon. Yo, how many drops do we need to get from Sir Godfrey Higgins? Yo, he giving us that drop, yeah. Number 9. See how much we got left to go, because I'm running up time, but look at all this I've underlined already, so let's keep going. Number 9, it seems to me that great numbers or circumstances are producible and will be produced in the following work to prove that the mythology, etc., of Egypt were derived from India, but which persons who are of a different opinion endeavor to explain away as inconclusive proofs. They, however, produce few or no circumstances tending towards the proof of that country, that India borrowed from Egypt, to enable the friends of the superior antiquity of India, in their turn, to explain away or disprove. It is well-known fact that our Hindu soldiers, when they arrived in Egypt in the late war, recognized the gods of their country to the ancient temples, particularly their god Krishna. The striking similarity, indeed identity, of the style of architecture and the ornaments of the ancient Egyptian and Hindu temples, Mr. Maurice has proved beyond all doubt, He says, travelers who have visited Egypt in periods far more recent than those in which the above-cited authors journeyed thither confirm the truth of their relation, in regard both to the number and extent of the excavations, the beauty of the sculptures, and their similitude to those carved in the caverns of India. The final result, therefore, of this extended investigation is that, in the remotest periods, there has existed a most intimate connection between the two nations, and that colonies immigrating from Egypt to India, or from India to Egypt, transported their deities into the country in which they respectively took up their abode. This testimony of Reverend Mr. Maurice is fully confirmed by Sir W. Jones, who says, quote, "The remains of architecture and sculpture in India, which I mentioned here as mere monuments of antiquity, not as specimens of ancient art, seem to prove an early connection between this country and Africa. The pyramids of Egypt, the colossal statues described by Pausanias and others, the Sphinx and the Hermes Canis, which last bears a great resemblance to the Varahavatar, or the incarnation of Vishnu in the form of a boar, indicate the style and mythology of the same indefatigable workmen who formed the vast excavations of Karnara, the various temples and images of Buddha, and the idols which are continually dug up at Gaya or in its vicinity. The letters on many of those monuments appear, as I have before intimated, partly of Indian and partly of Abyssinian or Ethiopic origin, and all these indubitable facts may induce no ill-founded opinion that Ethiopia and Hindustan were peopled or colonized by the same extraordinary race, in confirmation of which it may be added that the mountaineers of Bengal and Bahar can hardly be distinguished in some of their features, particularly their lips and noses, from the modern Abyssinians, who the Arabs call the children of Cush, and the ancient Hindus, according to Strabo, differing in nothing from the Africans, but in the straightness and smoothness of their hair, while that of the others was crisp or woolly. Wow. A difference proceeding chiefly, if not entirely, from the respective humidity or dryness of their atmospheres. Okay, so they're saying it's because of the weather itself. Whatever, they can try and do about that if they want. Hence, the people who received the first light of the rising sun, according to the limited knowledge of the ancients, are said by Apuleius to be the Ari and Ethiopians. The who? Ari. What they end up doing with that Ari word? They turned it into Ariland, okay? They turned it into Aryan, so Aryan and Ireland. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so you gotta watch. But again, who were the first to receive the first light of the rising sun? You know what that terminology means? That means who were the first people on earth? The first to receive the first light, or who received the first light of the rising sun? Who was here on earth first? By which he clearly meant certain nations of India, where we frequently see figures of Buddha with curled hair, apparently designed for a representation of it in its natural state. Now, when we go about thinking of this, again, we have so many comparisons in relation to Buddhism and Mayan, right? Buddha and Mayan. We've done this previously in so many episodes, y'all. Okay, so you have to look at it in those regards. The similarities, not only in symbols, but culture, statutes, poses. Again, Sir W. Jones says, Mr. Bruce and Mr. Bryant have proved that the Greeks gave the appellation of Indians to the nation of Africa, and to the people among whom we now live. I shall account for this in the following work. Now it says, Mons de Guines maintains that the inhabitants of Egypt in very old times had unquestionably a common origin with their old natives of India, as is fully proved by their ancient monuments and the affinity of their languages and institutions, both political and religious. Okay, so we got to think about Toltecs settled Egypt, and we got people coming over now from India or Hindustan up to Egypt or over to Egypt. Like, there's a lot going on, but this is over massive amounts of time as well, y'all. Don't think of it as just like recent or within just one time period. Like, we got ages, remember that. Many circumstances confirming the above, particularly with respect to the language, will be pointed out hereafter. Number 10. It is curious to observe the ingenuity exercised by Sir W. Jones to get over obstacles which oppose themselves to his theological creed, which he has previously determined nothing shall persuade him to disbelieve. He says, quote, "We are told that the Phoenicians, like the Hindus, adored the sun and asserted water to be first of created things. Nor can we doubt that Syria, Samaria, and Phoenice, or the long strip of land on the shore of the Mediterranean, were anciently peopled by a branch of the Indian stock, but were afterwards inhabited by that race which, for the present, we call Arabian," unquote. Indian stock? What is Indian stock? What is the true Indian stock? Y'all already know, man. Here we see he admits that the ancient Phoenicians were Hindus. Uh-oh. Which Hindus? Curly-haired Hindus. Okay, watch out. He then goes on to observe that, quote, "In all three of the oldest religions was the Assyrian, as it is called by Seldin, and the Samaritan letters appear to have been the same first with those of Phoenice," unquote. Then he gives, this is number 4, footnote 4, you can see. Okay, you can find it there. Now, with respect to which was the oldest religion, as their religions were all at the bottom precisely the same. Okay, we've spoken about that before, just recently now, with Clymer in the latest episode of Atlantis is America, the worship of the sun. There is as strong a probability that the earliest occupiers of the land, the Hindus, were the founders of the solar worship as the contrary. Okay, so earliest occupiers of this land, the Hindus, were the founders of the solar worship. And what do we know? Who do we know of as worshiping the sun, having major sun worship? Okay, look at it, yo. We're talking about America. What y'all talking about? Okay, so we're on page 59. Book 1, Chapter 4, Section 10, okay? When the various circumstances and testimonies which have been detailed are taken into consideration, there can be scarcely any doubt left on the mind of the reader that by the word Ethiopian 2 different countries have been meant. This seems to be perfectly clear. And it is probable, very probable, that by an Ethiopian, comma, a Negro, correctly speaking, he says, may have been meant not merely a black person, and it seems probable that the following may have been the real fact, that a race either of Negroes or blacks, but probably of the former, came from India to the west, occupying or conquering and forming a kingdom of the 2 banks of the Euphrates, the eastern Ethiopia alluded to in Numbers, okay? That they advanced, occupying Syria, Phoenicia, Arabia, and Egypt. That they, or some tribe of them, were the shepherd kings of Egypt. That after a time the natives of Egypt rose against them and expelled part of them into Abyssinia or Ethiopia, another part of them into Idumea or Syria or Arabia, and another part into the African desert or Libya, where they were called Lubim. Lubim. Who out here speaking of the Lubim? We need to dive into the Lubim. The time at which these people came to the west was certainly long previous to the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, but how long previous to that event must remain doubtful. No system of chronology can be admitted as evidence. None. You see what I'm saying? They trying to go so far back. You can't go that far back. There ain't no way for you to go that far back, because they've taken so much of what is true and hidden and have been able to conceal it within their underground, libraries, collections. They ain't bringing that to the light, y'all. The time at which these people came to the West was certainly long previous. Okay. Every known system is attended to with too many difficulties. Perhaps chronology may be allowed to instruct us in relation to facts as to which preceded or followed, but certainly nothing more. No chronological date can be depended on previous to the capture of Babylon by Cyrus. Whether we can depend upon it quite so far back seems to admit of doubt. Now, we can say thank you to Anatoly Fomenko for all of his work, and that helps us. There's no doubt about it. Especially getting rid of the phantoms, getting rid of the fantasies, the just people that they interject into the historical record as true, which are not even real people whatsoever. We just spoke about that in relation to Homer. Part of the ancient monuments of Egypt may have been executed by these people. The Memnoniums found in Persia and in Egypt leave little room to doubt this. In favor of this hypothesis, all ancient, sacred, and profane historical accounts agree. See how they say that? All of the ancient sacred, so the sacred ones that get withheld and don't nobody get to see them but special people, and then you got the profane historical accounts. They both are agreeing. But you got to understand that there are two different historical accounts. And that's why we dive into all of them together. And poetical works of imagination cannot be admitted to compete as evidence with the works of serious historians like Herodotus. Okay? This hypothesis likewise reconciles all the accounts which at first appear discordant, but which no other will do. It is also confirmed by a considerable quantity of circumstantial evidence. It is, therefore, presumed by the writer, he may safely assume in his forthcoming discussions, that there were two Ethiopias, one to the east of the Red Sea, the other to the west of it, and that a very great nations of blacks from India did rule over almost all Asia in a very remote era, in fact, beyond the reach of history or any of our records. Repeat for all you people wanting to propagate the hijack. It is, therefore, presumed by the writer he may safely assume in his forthcoming discussions that there were two Ethiopias, one to the east of the Red Sea, the other to the west of it, and that a very great nation of blacks from India did rule over almost all Asia in a very remote era. In fact, so remote, it is beyond the reach of history or any of our records. I mean, well, y'all lucky we on this next chapter, because I was about to stop it there. I mean, that's getting too good. That's a point where you close it off and be like, hey, man, where we getting at? This and what has been observed respecting judicial astrology will be retained in recollection by my reader. They will both be found of great importance in our future inquiries. In my essay on the Celtic Druids, I have shown that a great nation called Celtae, of whom the Druids were the priests, spread themselves almost over the whole earth, and are to be traced in their rude gigantic monuments from India to the extremity of Britain. Who these can have been but the early individuals of the black nation of whom we have been treating, I know not, and in this opinion I am not singular. The learned Maurice says, Cuthites, i.e. Celts, built the great temples in India and Britain, and excavated the caves of the former, unquote. With his footnote right here, so you can go down here and look at this one if you want. These are olds, okay? And the learned mathematician Reuben Burrow has no hesitation in pronouncing Stonehenge to be a temple of the black, curly-headed Buddha. Repeat, Reuben Burrow has no hesitation in pronouncing Stonehenge to be a temple of the black, curly-headed Buddha. I shall leave no further consideration of this black nation for the present. I shall not detain my reader with any of the numerous systems of the Hindus, the Persians, the Chaldeans, Egyptians, or other nations, except in those particular instances which immediately relate to the object of this work, in the course of which I shall often have occasion to recur to what I have here said, and also shall have opportunities of supporting it by additional evidence. So by the learned men, we can see what's going on in this chapter. If you learned up, if you've been studying with me, we're going to keep correlating this with other bodies of work, which we've already done. But this body of work is so extensive and so important to me. Just because dude, Godfrey Higgins, didn't release this, bro, while he was alive. He wasn't looking for notoriety. He wasn't looking for fame. The aspect that all of H.P. Blavatsky's work is based off of Godfrey Higgins' work itself. And that this body of work is so extensive. I'm talking about, bro, we on page, what is we on page 100 of 913. And this ain't the only body of work that he has. So again, we're just going to keep continuing on in our research and understanding what is true without all the hijack, without all the, we is just getting down to the meat and potatoes, y'all. And when I mean meat, I'm actually talking about the fruit, because I don't eat no meat, you dig? So in book 2 of chapter 1, on the next part, it looks as though we're going to be diving into the ancient Persians of the religion of Abraham, the first books of Genesis, disingenuous conduct, and the translations of the Bible. Of course, we know that we have that, and it's been purposely done. Look how many books have been withheld from their own collection. And then Abraham acknowledged more than one God. Okay, so understanding that more than one God, the hierarchy of everything that comes from the great source. But I think this was a great chapter, and I want to hear y'all's comments. I want to know where y'all can relate some of this stuff if you're getting all the way through. Give me some more references. Give me some more authors. I know I've got authors that correlate with this, and we're just going to keep diving into it, bro. This is some amazing stuff. So until the next one, y'all, I love y'all all. Stay up, stay blessed. Peace and blessings. I love you. It's Tona V. Y'all connect up. Let's stay up. Oh, one more thing, y'all. Yo, I got some merch up. I think I got the link maybe here. If not, I'll post the link down in the description. I got some merch. There's some pretty cool stuff. None of it's AI. All of it's historically accurate. That's what we're trying to keep up to, because we know as AI comes through, it's going to be burning up all of our images, bro, to where we start seeing stuff and thinking that it's real and old when it's not. So we're going to keep alive a lot of the ancient or historical paintings as far back as we can go and find. But yeah, I got some merch up. And yeah, y'all come over and vibe with me on Instagram. Everything's Tona V. Everything's Tona V. I'm the only Tona V in the world. So y'all come vibe with me.